Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at the Score Select cards for football. And it's really only 3 years that they did it, 93, 94, and 96, so it'll be one nice self-contained video. And the story of Select football it's kind of a sad story because it was a card design really done for baseball, and it never really worked in the chaotic and very high creative world of football cards. So it's a little bit of a truncated history, but that's kind of how it works. So Select was Score's answer to SP and the other ultra premium brands. This was the third wave in the development of cards in the 90s. Started off with 89, 90 when a bunch of new sets and new ideas came in. 91 was when everybody did a premium brand, and then 93 was when the real high-end cards started to show up on the market. And Score knew that they needed to kind of answer the bell. They had to make that next step beyond Pinnacle, and this was their solution to it. And in baseball, unfortunately, they were thinking too much of Score and Pinnacle. That was really kind of their idea, so they were trying to make a more refined version of those. And the card that they came up with fell very much flat. They were not really ready for the level of card quality that would come out of other manufacturers. And so the card that they made in baseball was it was a thin card stock. It was very much like Score. It was not glossy. It lacked basically just about everything that an ultra premium brand was going to need. They figured that making a slightly smaller print run and making a slightly more dynamic card would be enough, but they very quickly learned that that was not the case. So by the time that football came around, they were finally prepared. They had rethought the model, and the cards got a glossy finish. They got rid of the double green border and they went with a black and burgundy border. They added some gold foil in it, and the card itself, it was much better designed. The picture was better chosen. The way that everything worked on the card, it actually carried this time, and it looked really good. In fact, I remember at the time there was kind of a debate going on as to whether SP or Select was the better card, and it really did come down more to availability rather than quality, because SP was seriously better than Select. But Select Football was a good enough card that it could actually hold up pretty well with SP. So it wasn't too bad, but there was a long way that Score was going to have to go in order to really compete with what the 90s was truly bringing. And it was kind of sad to see them in their efforts to do so, where they just never quite got it. But at least with 93 Select, they started to figure it out. They got a pretty good start, and the 93 set for football, only for football, looked great. On the front, on the back, not so much, but they had a lot of room to improve. So for that 93 set, they had the main cards, and they had rookies at the end where they added an extra strip of gold foil, and the rookie cards looked really good too. So this was a set that was kind of a standout set for 93, and by kind of, I mean it really was one of the elite brands. It's just that when you put that next to SP, it had a ways to go, but it was definitely alongside Ultra at least, which in a way is kind of a sad statement to make because Ultra was just a premium brand. This was supposed to be better than Ultra, but in many ways it was, and in many ways it wasn't quite. But if you're starting out a brand, you have room to improve. You always have room to improve, and so that was what we needed to see in 1994. The set also had one insert set, and this was Gridiron Skills, and this launched their Dufex technology. Now Dufex is similar to when you have like etched metal. It's not actually using the same approach. It has all these little facets, so it looks not quite sequiny, but it has a glistening quality to it that makes the card very, very lively. And it's more like a satin texture, so that the whole card has this pretty evenly distributed around it. And that makes every part of the card really kind of lively and exciting, and it's a neat effect to have. And fortunately with the Gridiron Skills cards, they knew to reduce the design and the images down to a simplistic enough extent that they could basically really showcase the Dufex technology, and so the cards look great. The card backs not so much, but it's card backs often are a problematic affair, but on the card fronts they look really good. It is kind of sad that they only made one insert set, but it was a good insert set. They did sell a specialty set as well. This is kind of an ode to the Young Superstars cards that they'd made for Score. This was just called Young Stars. And the set came in a box that had basically a Dufex slipcover. So the front looks a lot like the actual card, and the back has a checklist on it. And inside the slipcover, you have a really nice, kind of like a leather case. And inside the case, it has a very deep, almost a velvet type of an interior. I mean, they really cared about this set. And the whole 93 set was treated with that kind of respect. And I wish that they'd done that more with the 94 set, that they'd tried to this extent. But at least with 93 they did. And the Young Stars cards really do a great job with the Dufex. So they have big fields of color on the card front that just really glisten with this technology. And it's really great. The card backs are, it's a scorecard back, so what do you expect? And these sets also came in a limited production, so there were only 5,000 of them, and each one had its own serial number on a special card in it. So that kind of helped. So the whole thing was it was a really special thing that they created. Now for 94, they fell into the trap that everybody fell into. 1994 was the year that everybody decided that they were going to make cards for grown-ups. The idea of what would a card for an adult look like there was a very strong formality that everybody felt that they needed to go to, and everybody did pretty much the same thing. So it didn't matter if you looked at Pacific, at Bowman, at Ultra, at Select, at Pinnacle, Upper Deck. They all did the same thing. They got rid of the border. They got very minimal detailing on the card, a lot of gold, and all of the cards fell into the same problem of they didn't do a good job with the images. And so when you go as simplistic as all of these companies did, you've really got to be able to earn it with the images. And Ultra actually did okay with their images, but pretty much everybody else kind of fell off a cliff. And Select was one of the worst defenders of this. The cards are probably the best designed of all of these cards. They did a really good job with quality of the card. They had a nice little oval down in the corner with kind of a gold foil textured surface with the team name in it, and then the player's last name was in very hard to read gold foil down on the other corner with kind of the Select logo kind of ghosted in underneath. And the nature of the card was, it was well thought out, but the card itself didn't have dynamism. It was difficult to read, but the biggest problem, again, the images were not well selected. There was nothing that really grabbed you about these images, and that's a sad aspect to pretty much the entire year. Everybody really had to do a lot of soul searching to figure out just how to make these cards for adults. And it wasn't that they were abandoning kids. Kids were still going to have all of the cards that they wanted to have. But what was this new market for the high dollar people who were going to be buying cards? What was that going to be? They were trying to figure it out. And Select tried too hard without realizing what the key was. And really what everybody had to realize was that the cards still have to be flashy, catchy, not kitsch, but they have to be fun. Even when you're designing cards for a grown-up, they have to be fun. And that's kind of what they forgot with these cards. The card backs are kind of cartoony, and it's weird to look at just how well they manicured the card front, and then the card back is kind of a big loud yell it's kind of weird, a little distracting in a way. Now fortunately the rookies in this set look a lot better. They actually have some details that almost create a border, and it comes from the rookie photo shoots and from practice fields where you get more isolated shots, so the pictures are able to look a lot better. But yeah, that's kind of the way that the main set went. They also had a really interesting series of checklists. They had 4 checklists, and the checklists were based on either NFC or AFC players. And they had a checklist that was all NFC, one that was all AFC, and then the other 2 checklists have both NFC and AFC on either side. But what's strange is that this is a scattered set, so the players are all over the place. And when you have an NFC checklist or an AFC checklist, it's skip number, which it's a weird checklist. Either take all of the random numbers and group them together so that we can see the teams, or put a 1, 2, whatever checklist together so that you can see all the numbers rather than having to go, okay, so I need card number 5. This says 4 and 6. I guess I got to go to the other conference. It's a really weird idea that they came up with, and it makes the checklist difficult to read, but that's what they did. So those are there. They also had 2 SP cards, and these were numbered SR1 and SR2, basically select rookies. And it's the most prominent defensive and offensive rookies in the set. So it's Dan Wilkinson and it's Marshall Faulk. And these cards do a really good job using the dynamism of the Dufex technology. So it's kind of like an explosion in the background. It's kind of neat, but it's really about the Dufex, the way that the Dufex reads. They also did pretty much the same thing with Franco Harris. They did an autographed card of his. The autograph's on the back. The Dufex treatment is on the front. And then they had 2 insert sets. The first one is Canton Bound, and this is a card that it also likes to really show off the Dufex technology using colors. And here they were using the Dufex technology in almost a brushed metal approach. They had really bright colors, and the card reads really well. In this a card this lively, it's easy for the player to kind of get lost in it, to get buried in it. But here the player actually reads really well. So this is a well-designed card. It works great. Unfortunately, the Future Force cards are not as successful. They have a really tight headshot of each player, and everything gets kind of washed out, and so the cards don't have the same jump. Whenever you get the light so that the whole card becomes lively, the player kind of disappears. And when you get the player to stand out a little bit more, you kind of got to tone down the cards, so it's not a good marriage of the two. But they're pretty good follow-up cards for the previous year's rookies. Now this set, no surprise, really didn't work too well. Pinnacle had done a little bit better because the card was supposed to be slightly a half step down from Select, but they actually had parallels in it. They had their artist-proof parallels. So that card set was going to hold up a little bit better, but Select needed to somehow separate itself, and they couldn't quite figure it out. So they skipped the year 1995, which is similar to what Bowman would do the next year in 96. Basically, they developed their Select certified card, and that was something to really compete at the high end of the mid-90s, and it was a good approach for them to take. And so they put all their focus on there, and they took Select out of circulation for 1 year in football. Now in baseball they were able to keep it going, but in football they had to basically pull it back and then come back in 96 and try something else. And for 96 they tried to do kind of a marriage of the two 94 cards, the Pinnacle and the Select. And with this, they used more of a Select-like design where they had a big image with the border kind of out of the way. In this case, they basically just stuffed a big football leather printed border over on the side, a really thick one with a big headshot in the middle, some gold foil detailing, some stuff like that. And on the card back, it's, I'm really not sure what they were going for. I don't hate the card back, but I sure don't love it. But that was basically what they put together for this card, and it was all horizontal. All the cards in this set were horizontal. Well, all the player cards were horizontal. But they also added a parallel of artist proof where they replaced the gold foil with rainbow holofoil. And so that's what they did with the card set. And so the main cards didn't have any jump. They didn't have anything that stood out, but the set was really about chasing the parallel. And in that way, the card set worked really well. It's unfortunate the Select had to resort to a gimmick, but in the 90s, we loved our gimmicks, and that did make this set work. It's just that the set, again, couldn't really hold up on its own, which was the whole point of Select. The card set also had rookies, and with these rookies, they needed to make sure that you knew which team they were, so they took out the headshot and replaced it with basically a logo of each team, which really, for these rookies, was really a big benefit on these cards. They also had one subset, and it was Fluid and Fleet, and this was actually a vertical card. And this is one of those classic subsets that they design where they're designing the cards. They want to do something that's a subset that's just kind of like for the set, and they throw that out there. And these are cards that don't look good on their own. They look pretty good at the back of the set, but on their own they look mediocre because they're not really designed. So they're there, but there's that subset, and then they have a bunch of checklists, and this is the way I like checklists, because the checklist is on the back, but on the front it has a player, or in one case it has both John Elway and Barry Sanders on the same card. But basically you have a whole bunch of checklists that are also player cards at the same time. And obviously all of these have the artist proof cards as well, so that's the nature of how they built the set, but it really is a set that's built entirely about chasing the parallels. But fortunately, they did also have 3 insert sets. And the first set was Prime Cuts. This is a strange card because you can hardly even see the player on these cards. There's a big football at the top, it's die cut around it, and so that really stands out. They have some good gold detailing up the top, but otherwise the rest of the card just kind of disappears. But it is a pretty cool card. Now these cards are limited in number to less than 2,000. There's 1,996 of them, but these are not sequentially numbered. This is a set that just has a 1 of 1996 as just a general print on it. So don't look for the serial numbers, but they are more rare. Then you have the building blocks, and the building blocks gets back to the Dufex. And in this case, it took me a while to figure out what the background was, but it's basically a Rubik's Cube. And on one's face, it has a whole bunch of pictures of the player on it, almost like little TV screens. And that's what kind of threw me off for a long time. It's an interesting idea. The card's not very dynamic, partially because it's a little too dark, partially because it's too busy, but that's another insert set. And then they have the formables, and formables as in four, F-O-U-R, the number. And this is 4 players each of 4 different teams. So the teams are the Cowboys, Packers, the Colts, and the Steelers. And on the top it has either blue or red, blue for NFC teams, red for AFC teams, with a picture of the player, the name, all that stuff. And then down at the bottom, or really the bottom 2/3 of the card, is a big hologram that's a really kind of a lousy hologram. It's just 2 helmets butting into each other. Kind of difficult to see, but a surprisingly long range of motion within the hologram. So it's an interesting thing. The cards look good as long as you don't look at the hologram. Once you pay attention to the hologram, it looks kind of cheap, but the top of the cards actually look really good. In fact, the top of the cards look like what Select is supposed to have been. You look at that, and had they actually applied what they did just on the top to this card set, it could have actually been a great card set. They never did figure it out. And that's the problem with Select in football. For baseball, it was able to work. It was designed around baseball. It could work in baseball, but football was way too dynamic, way too creative. You had to really go out and make a major statement. You had SP on one side, where they started doing the brushed metal approach to their cards right up at the front end. And then you had Pacific, which was doing prismatic cards. And at the same time, you still had Action Pack doing 3-dimensional cards. I mean, football really was the area where you had to bring it. You had to earn it. And Score was not the right company for it yet. But as you got past 95, Score could finally start to play. A little bit too little too late, unfortunately for them, but Select was kind of a lost cause, and that's just the nature of it. So, but that is Select proper. I'll talk about Select Certified in another video. That's this one though. So thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you learned a bit. Check out some of my other videos, and thank you very much for watching.